Right. It must be tempting with such a predominance in terms of the widespread support amongst the people for the ANC. No Western country has such a large base, well in excess of 60%, to abuse power and certainly the threat to a free press. In the case of, say, the Russian Federation with the former President Putin,
Yes.
where you can take away the free press. Just how much nearer are we to that here?
That's a very interesting question, because as we said earlier on, we discovered that the 60% of the power base are not very strongly influenced by the media, the written media. So if you do any curtailment of the press, it's not going to affect the power base of the ANC that much, rather the opposition parties. But of course, the moment you start tinkering with the freedom of the press here, then you start finding that our overseas audience starts taking an interest in South Africa.
Right, so there is a balance.
Your investment level would go, yes, your confidence in South Africa for foreign investment, the attitude of America, of the United Kingdom, of the European community towards a government which starts to curtail the press will be quite significant in terms of the impact economically rather than politically. So it's not the ANC base that will be affected, it'll be the country as a whole.
I think most people, perhaps in Europe and certainly the UK, have got used to the ANC government in that sense. Yet, winding back to the beginning of the conversation, we referenced the National Party itself. Where's the National Party gone?
Well, as a body corporate, it's dead. It died 4 years ago when the leader, now Minister van Schalkwyk, decided to throw his lot in with the ANC on the basis that if you join the powerhouse, you can do something. If you're outside, you can't. But at the same time, of course, he recognized the reality that the Gorbachev syndrome applied to South Africa as well. Who was a dictator in reforms is going to lose in the end. And that's exactly what happened to the National Party. You cannot be the reformer and then still have to capitalize on goodwill because you were the oppressor before. So the voters became disenchanted with the National Party. Don't forget, we now had a voter base which is multiracial, and the majority of those people were badly treated by the National Party, so the numbers started to decline significantly. They reached rock bottom 4 years ago, 2% of the population, which hardly got them a seat in Parliament, so they decided to disband the party. So the National Party body corporate is gone. But one asks the question, what's happened to all their voters? There were over 2 million of them. Where have they gone to? Our perception at the moment is that the majority have gone to the Democratic Alliance. I'm talking about the white population. The coloured population, who were also a big factor after 1990 in the National Party, have split between three parties. The Independent Democrats of Patricia de Lille, the ANC, who got a large number of the vote, and then the DA, the Democratic Alliance, got a portion of the vote as well. So really it's been fragmented and it's scattered in all directions.
Is the ANC a monolithic block of voters, or is it made up of disparate groups that remember the Mandela image and the icon, and perhaps when he moves on, do you think the ANC support will crumble and break apart in some way? I mean, how much of a danger is there of that, and what are the chances of the Democratic Alliance, and perhaps in conjunction with the Independents, forming a government at any time in the future?
Dealing with the first question first, the fragmentation of the ANC, I think the propensity and the possibility of that happening in the next 5 years is quite good. One also has to remember that you have tribal bases, and that a large number of ANC supporters are Zulu, a large proportion are Xhosa, and a large proportion are Venda or Shangaan, whatever they are. So when you get fragmentation, you're going to find the fragmentation washing back into the tribal areas and supporting the tribal leaders. Now, once that break comes, then you'll have a complete shattering and the possibility that other parties may be able to get in. We also must remember that the tripartite alliance between the Communist Party, COSATU, the trade union organization, and the ANC, plays an essential bridging function between people who are not of the same ethnic group. And as long as you've got the tripartite working in favor of the ANC, the chances of it breaking up sufficiently to allow other people to come into power, I think, are fairly remote. So if we are politics watching, the thing to do at the moment is to see what happens to COSATU. Who are they backing? They're backing Zuma at the moment. What happens to the Communist Party? As small as they are, they're a very important part of the tripartite alignment. And then what happens within the traditional ANC itself? Short answer to your question is, I think it'll take a long time before any other non-ANC aligned party can take power in South Africa. If you just look at the numbers, the 40% versus the 60%, you can't get a majority from outside the black population.
Now, you referenced Zuma. He's got a checkered history. People are aware in the West of Mandela and a particular period of important change. The move to Mbeki and now this man Zuma coming along. What is this Zuma potentially going to be like as a possible president, since he seems to be in the prime position now for that?
Yes. You know, what is very interesting is that the first lineup of leaders of the ANC were the fairly well-educated people of South Africa. Mandela was a lawyer. Thabo Mbeki is an economist. A variety of cabinet ministers after 1994 were from the group of black people in South Africa who had the opportunity for formal education. They then had to deal with constitutional matters. And what they have to address at the moment is the poverty of the masses. Now, the poverty of the masses are driven by what they vote against rather than what they vote for. And this is something that Zuma has played extremely well. He's orchestrated the against vote extremely well. And then, of course, you're going to find a decline in the restraint of the cabinet, because their power base is going to start rising up against them, unless something drastic happens to alleviate poverty. Now, how do you do that overnight? You've got a Western democratic system going, you've got a freehold title, you've got a productive society which is industrialized, which is dependent upon people finding their way if they are educated. Now, we know that the majority of South Africans are illiterate. So how do they integrate into the economic sphere successfully without education? That means the leaders like Zuma are going to have to short-circuit the traditional process of learning in order to become a free enterprise company owner or manufacturer. And that is the frightening thing. What are they going to do next in order to try and ensure that they spread their largesse more evenly in South Africa without undermining your productive capacity of a Western industrial society? They have tried with BEE, Black Economic Empowerment, to short-circuit this by having quotas of blacks that have to be participants in your company. The problem is they get paid, but they don't produce. This is the difficulty. Our friends from the north, Zimbabwe, have learned a very bitter lesson in the land grab of the farms. You don't just take away another man's farm and give it to somebody else and think he's going to be a successful farmer. You have to understand farming, you have to understand agriculture. We wait with bated breath to see whether Zuma is going to try some drastic steps such as Zimbabwe. It's not impossible.
He seems like a populist, and you made reference to the economist-based Mbeki, the legal-based Mandela. Both of these men are professional people, and history will judge the effectiveness of their presidency. But somebody who hasn't got the qualifications and perhaps plays too much than the masses, there are parallels in history before. And what do you think would be the effect here if he continued that populist momentum into his presidency? Would he listen to advice, basically?
You know, I think what would happen, and he's going to play the popular leader, is we are going to compromise the pillars of our current constitution, which is democracy, free enterprise, based on Western values. He's going to modify those significantly in order to address the aspirations of his power base. And they are simple economic power. The poverty alleviation is the major and key element of problems that Zuma is going to have to address. He won't address any more constitutional problems. He may start disassembling some of the constitutional provisions. Crime is a very big factor, but that's linked again to poverty. The higher the poverty level, the higher the crime. The inefficiency of the police, these things he'll have to address if he wants to create a climate which is going to allow us to grow economically sufficiently to absorb the poverty-stricken people. But how do you do that when the capability of the general population, the 60%, is such that they cannot in fact participate in the economy? Big trick.
Do you see a situation, as you referenced earlier, with various groups and tribal loyalties, whereby South Africa, which has been a patchwork of kingdoms, well, going back 150 years under white rule, eventually splitting up?
You know, that could be a real possibility. Some 20 years ago, there was a party called the New Republic Party, and they mooted the idea of a constitution based more on a federal model than on a single unitary state. We've got 11 provinces at the moment, but they are tightly tied into the central government. Their powers are divested from central government, their funding comes from central government predominantly, so they don't operate in a true federal system. But there's a very real possibility, and I think you've touched on something here which could be a direction South Africa could move into in order to diffuse political tensions, and that is to go for a federal model with perhaps a central government which deals with macro issues such as defence, police, macro financing, etc., and devolving more powers to the provinces. This would fit very well into the mould of, you have a Zulu population in Natal, you have a Xhosa population in the Eastern Cape, you have a coloured population and a white population in the Witwatersrand and in the Cape, and then you have the Vendors and the Shongans, all with their own geographic areas. And if we go back to the tenets of the tribal traditional value system, this would fit in very well. But in the end, you still have to address the inequalities in terms of economics. 70% of the wealth of South Africa is generated in Gauteng. The rest of South Africa has to share the balance of the economy, which is something like 30%. Your uneven distribution of rainfall is a very important factor in South Africa because our economy depends predominantly on mining and agriculture, with manufacturing slotted in between. But your mining could come to an end for a variety of reasons. You run out of resources, and your agriculture depends on where the rainfall is. So just to add one more factor, the Transkei and KwaZulu-Natal would be advantaged in terms of rainfall.